All right, everyone. Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and it's great to be back here on Adobe Live for a 2-day series today, video editing with my good friend Vashi Nedomansky from Vashi Visuals. So we've got 2 days to cover all sorts of really amazing stuff in Premiere, in Audition, probably a bit of After Effects. So fortunate to have not only one of the best people I know and someone who's just done everything in the industry, but someone who truly has an enormous amount of knowledge and context to bring to this. So you're not going to just see like standard editing stuff. We're going to go through all different types of projects and talk formats and really esoteric, nerdy stuff that's really hard to get pretty much anywhere else. So this is going to be super exciting. We're so glad to have Vashi. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things as always, just real quickly for the schedule today. So only got a couple more hours with us live on Adobe Live today. So again, I'm with you with Vashi from noon until 2 p.m. Pacific. Then at 2, we've got the XD Daily Creative Challenge with Andrea. And then at 2:30, rounding out the day, Design in the Dark with Andrew and Jennifer. So lots more to do. And then, of course, we've got a full schedule coming back tomorrow here on Adobe Live. So I'll tell you what, as always, it's always great to see everybody. See, we've got really, wow, thousands of people in the chat here. So we've got Rodrigo and Desiree and Eunice and Abdurrahman and Hassan. All right. And David and Elias and Lulu and Bongi and Zia and Drick and Dublegru and Arumia. Wow, such a wonderfully international audience. Really lovely to see you all. Okay, so without further ado, he is a filmmaker. He is an editor. He is a producer. He has worked in Hollywood on incredible Hollywood films like Deadpool, Six Below, and many others. He is a sound editor. He's done basically everything. He's even had, I was going to say, had the pleasure of filming me once, but the pleasure was truly mine. He is my good friend and filmmaker, Vashi Nedomansky from Vashi Visuals. How's it going today, man?
It's going great. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely. Coming in loud and clear.
Wonderful. That's the first problem we always have. I'm like, oh my God, the technology, and you just want to make sure you're seen and heard and everyone can hear it. So that's awesome. So again, thank you so much for having me for 2 days of chaos. And I'm excited to share some of my workflows and tips and tricks and things I've learned over 20 years of editing and professionally in Hollywood on lots of projects. So
awesome. Yeah. So, and I know, I mean, I know we were going to try and sort of break this down. We've got a lot of different topics. So what are we looking at primarily for the first couple of topics today that we're going to be going over?
So what I'm thinking is that with my experience over the 20 years, I've basically had to break down the post-production workflow from ingest to delivery. And I've broken it down to 10 steps. So over the next 2 hours today and then 2 hours tomorrow, we're going to do like 5 chapters each day where I just touch upon what I've learned to be the best practices that work for me. Now they could not, maybe they don't work for everyone, but they have worked for me. And I've, and like all the other filmmakers, we've gone through the trials and tribulations of making mistakes. And that's where we learn the most. And that's when we try and nail down what we really like and what works for us and what's the best method to approach stuff. But also, as you know, every project's a different challenge. You have to be adept and pivot and make changes and deal with new codecs and deal with new everything. So game plan is to share over 2 hours today, the first half and then the second half. And once we get into my timeline, I can break it down a little easier. But that's what we're looking at,
Great.
Broad strokes.
All right. Well, perfect. Well, as always, we're coming to you live on Adobe Live, Behance, Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope. So again, thank you so much. And Vashi, of course, I'll be fielding you questions and I'll be answering things. I'm probably going to be primarily silent, fielding a lot of questions in the chat. Well, all right, not primarily, but really this is for you to drive. So, but I'll be answering your questions in the chat, and I can also field some up to Vashi as you bring them up. So again, wherever you are.
I was going to say, Jason, because we're covering so much, like, all of post-production in 4 hours as a viewpoint, I think if people want to jump in, if something specific hits them, they're like, hey, can you clarify something? I don't want to leave anyone out. And this is based for beginners, professional, for everyone, because there's a structure to post-production. There's a structure to the creativity, and I want to share that.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, man, let's go ahead and kick into it. We've got your screen up here.
So,
all right.
Quick introduction, just for anyone who doesn't know me, and I'm sure that's a lot of people. I'm Vashi Nedomansky. I'm an ACE editor, proud member of that group. And I've worked on films like Deadpool, and I cut Sharknado 2, and today we're going to be talking about Six Below. And I just worked on, I've cut 11 feature films and worked on dozens of TV shows and all that other kind of stuff. So that's basically who I am, and this is what I'm going to try to be teaching you with. And Jason, you can see my screen? Is everything?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
looking good. Everything's coming through.
Okay, so just as we get into it, here are the 10 chapters or sections that we're going to go over. And I know we have a lot of time, but I don't want to rush, but I also don't want to miss anything. There's a lot to go over. So everything from your hardware choices out of the gate, the software choices, obviously Adobe for me for a long time, preferences, ingesting, basic film editing, advanced, audio editing, color correction, VFX and the timeline, VFX and deliverables. Now, one thing that's really important is, as an editor at any level these days in Hollywood or anywhere else, the more skills you have in your bag, the larger your tool bag, the more valuable you are. And every editor now is expected to be able to do an audio mix and pull a key using VFX, and much, much more than just cutting picture and then handing it over to someone. And I think all the viewers will recognize that producers and directors sometimes, if they don't see the whole completed narrative of that piece, they can't fill in the blanks. And it's not their fault, but it's our job to deliver a very polished and professional cut of anything that you're doing on the first pass, because there is no second chance. There is none of that stuff happening. So that's what I would say.
I find it also interesting too that, as you just pointed out, and again, for a lot of people who are kind of new in the industry, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's just an expectation that, whether you're filming it or, holding the boom mic, if you're the one in the post seat editing it together, you've got to deliver something that kind of seemingly appears kind of finished, even though it's very rough. Whereas the people reviewing it, they're kind of only expected to do their thing. It doesn't necessarily go both ways. But that's the burden we have in production, and that's really what I think everyone's going to be super excited to see you share today. So let's go ahead and get into it, man.
Okay, so first chapter is hardware and software. And again, some of this stuff's going to be kind of in the weeds out of the gate, because it's like, my analogy is, if you're going to drive a car from LA to Detroit, the first thing you have to do is gas up the car, check the oil, check the tire pressure, put windshield wiper fluid in, get some snacks. You can't just jump in the car and go. Your car has to be optimized and has to be the best car for that situation. Same with us. Like on Six Below, we had to. I'm just going to play this trailer in the background while we're doing this.
Yeah.
Just to have a sense of the film that we're dealing with. So you can hear me, right, Jace?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Okay. So what we had to do was, we were dealing with 6K footage, and this is the first Hollywood feature film where we had. Let me turn that down. Where we edited the native red files from the camera. And by doing this, we had to find the hardware solution, the software solution that could handle it. Because we didn't have time to do proxies or do transcodes, we had to jump right in. And every day I would get 4 or 5 hours of raw footage. And that's what I started cutting at night and in the morning. And because we were filming up in the mountains, we didn't have any place to go in terms of, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no connection. If the directors had to grab more footage, then we had to literally tell them right away, so they were still at the same spot. So again, the technology and the hardware feeds into the workflow that you're dealing with, and that's different on every film. So that was our first challenge with Six Below, was to have what could handle 6K at this time, red raw files where we're editing right off that. You need a powerful computer. And so,
you still do.
Especially
then, but even now, right? I mean,
and even 4K, if you don't have some meat on your computer and your processor, then it's going to lag. It's going to be a really miserable experience when it comes to editing. One thing that I've always tried to do as much is front load my hardware to the point, like, as much as I can invest up front is going to give you better results downstream. If you try and cut corners, if you try and like use less RAM or this or that, it's really going to bite you in post, because you're just going to be fighting the machine. You're going to be wasting time. You're going to be waiting on the machine. And not everyone has the amount of money for a huge budget for your post-production gear, but you do have to set it aside and go for the video cards and the RAM. Like those two things, I think you'd agree, or I hope you would agree, are some of the most important dealing with all these codecs and stuff that we have today. And so, but go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was going to say, yeah. And the funny thing is, I mean, again, now, when did you cut this? And was this 2017?
This is 2017, 2018 that we cut it, and then did post. It was like 9 months of post. And I actually, I use Premiere Pro. I've used it since 2006. I have a long history with it and seen many, many iterations. And this is definitely the best iteration that's going right now. Right. It was the only one that could handle this. We tested all the other NLEs out there to see if we could just handle the red raw footage. And that's why I keep coming back to Adobe. They work with us and they help make those improvements. For example, when I worked on Gone Girl and Deadpool, we were getting requests from the editors and the editorial staff, and then Adobe was making those changes on the fly and giving us new builds while we were editing. Which is amazing.
I actually remember that. I remember that during the Deadpool days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And on Deadpool, we had 550 hours of raw footage. So just tackling and managing that, it's a huge task, and that it can get out of hand. So let me just show you for our project. This is kind of interesting. I always like making these when I'm done. You can see that this is the entire spec sheet for the equipment we used on 6 Below to be able to effectively have 3 edit bays cutting and working at 6K with no proxies and no transcodes. So there's a lot of stuff in there. It's clear on your side. You can see it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. So I mean, you could just eyeball that and just get a sense. But our biggest investment was the Dell Tower, because it was like a 20 core monster with 128 gigs of RAM. But that's what we needed to be able to do that. And an interesting story is with 6 Below, I cut the whole feature film in one timeline when I was building out. And so I had a 2.5 hour, like, first rough cut assembly, all 6K red files in one timeline.
That's insane. Fun stuff. And it's funny, a couple people here, Adam Briggs is saying that he learned it the hard way. He was working with 4K and didn't have enough RAM and had to upgrade to 32 gigs with an NVIDIA 1660. And that's what the point I was going to make is, even 3 years ago, when you think about, the RAM limits of most of sort of many tower systems, and particularly on video cards. I mean, now we're used to 8, 16, 64 dedicated gigs of VRAM. Not so easy to come by 3.5 years ago. So it's, the fact that you were able to do this at all is pretty chilling. And I remember you telling me around this time, like, no, we're working with native red files, 6K, 2.35 to 1 or whatever the aspect was, like super ultra wide, and I just remember thinking, my God, you are absolutely pushing it to the limit. But those things continue, and what I'm sure what we're going to see now is, because you're editing on a laptop today, right? So
I'm editing on a laptop, so I don't have this system. I wish I had to go down. Right. I'm out in the desert, so I had to go down to a place called The Hive that has like ridiculous internet speeds up and down. I got my own conference room, so I can do this. But I'm cutting off a laptop, which is, for me, it's really limiting because I'm used to like a 49-inch screen and then a huge monitor above. So I'm all like, look how cute this is. But it's very interesting for sure.
Yeah, right.
It's always different, right?
Yeah.
So, but I did bring, what I brought with me was, we're going to work with some scenes, and I have a nice scene here that will be able to break down. And this is the 6K footage here on this laptop as well. So it's pretty crazy. I might have to go to half resolution or whatever.
Sure.
But but we'll get to that. Okay. But so that's the equipment I used, and then Premiere Pro we use. Obviously, I've been on it for so long. So that's our hardware and our software. Now the second chapter is preferences and some of our optimization. One thing that I don't think people do enough of is explore the innards of Premiere Pro to find out like what the options are. There's a lot of gotchas, and when you're starting a project, you have to prep everything properly. So it's really, really important that when you go to your preferences, there's 120 preferences, I think, all in. And what I wanted to do was kind of hit upon the ones that are really important to me in our workflow, and some of the things that people might not even know, because they are critical. There are certain things that if they're not turned on in the preferences, they won't work in the timeline. And the only way to learn that is the hard way, by going, why doesn't this work? And you pull your hair out, right?
Right.
So what I'd like to do is just plow through these preferences, just point out some of the most important ones for our workflow, and hopefully that'll help you. And that's a good start to be able to start a project properly and have everything working. So under the general tab, you tell me, do you say something?
Oh, no, I said that's great. I was going to say, and if you want to zoom in on some of these, the dialogue's it's just a little small. So if you wanted to, yeah. Actually, it should be legible. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I'm looking at it on multiple.
If someone, this is a new laptop, so I don't even know how to zoom in the screen.
Oh, okay.
That's how technically I can work circles around Premiere Pro, but I can't zoom into the screen.
Let's not have to refigure out the Windows architecture.
No worries.
We're good. Yeah.
So working in here, I leave tooltips on all the time, because the good thing about Premiere is, like, if you hover over something, you want to see what that functionality is, and there's so many options. I always leave that on. One of the other things that's important here is I always like to make sure that when my bins are opening, if I double click on any bin on any tab, that it opens in a tab and doesn't float. One of the best things about Premiere Pro is that everything's connected. And if you change this option to what most people do in like Avid stuff, in a new window, it's floating and sometimes gets stuck behind your main screen and you can't see it. So I always make sure that the tab's open next to something that's already attached. Appearance-wise, you guys are on your own. I don't like to go all the way black. I like to kind of back off so it's a little less contrasty and nice. Audio. This is really important. There's a couple things I'm going to show later tomorrow in the audio mixing stuff that we'll get to. But play audio while scrubbing is important. I always want to hear what's going on. Maintain pitch while shuttling. I always leave this on so I can play something at double speed and it stays the same pitch, but I can hear more. If I've already looked at all the dailies and we're getting 4 or 5 hours of stuff in, I'll go double speed and leave the scrubbing on so I can hear the dialogue and still know what scene I'm in and what I'm looking at. Same with the maintain pitch. That's why I have to have that on. This is critical. This is a huge automatic waveform generation. If this is not on, when you first import any of your footage, the waveforms won't be made at that first step, and you'll have to do it later. And the worst part is when you have your waveforms, if you click this, it'll be created automatically. You can zoom in and out to see those waveforms even while it's playing. You can make adjustments in real time. I know on other NLEs, it has to keep rewriting it, and I hate that. I want them done. So automatic waveform generation has to be selected here before you import footage. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
And on that, Audition has that same setting. So, in Premiere, we refer to them as the PEKs, and Audition is the PK files, right?
The bottom right of your screen, it's always building when you import new footage.
That's right.
Blue line, progress line. But that's critical. It's a little thing, but if you don't have that and you look for waveforms later, you're not going to have them. Right. So same in Audition, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And one more that's really important in this screen is automation keyframe optimization. Later, I put it to about almost 1 second, about 3/4 of a second. What this does, and I'll show you tomorrow in the audio section part, is you can ride the faders, as the term is, and you can change things with the slider, the audio value, the levels with the slider in real time, and it'll make the keyframes for you. Because when you're actually making keyframes and doing the rubber bands on an audio track, you have to draw them, keyframes, and go back, play it, hear if it's good or not, stop, make adjustments. With this, you can use the sliders in the audio mixer on the fly. You'll hear the music get louder or quieter. You'll hear the audio get louder or quieter. And when you hit stop, you'll see all the keyframes are drawn for you. So for me, that's huge. So I can basically mix live when I'm editing. And that's really important for music. And you must use that or have similar functionality.
Absolutely. And actually, I zoomed in here, I'm hitting upon, so your minimum time, so your linear keyframe thinning, those two elements right there are key, right? Because as you're pointing out, so I think the default is something like 150 milliseconds.
It's 150. It makes so many keyframes that you're like, what happened?
It's insane. So just to clarify for everybody, so if you have the default setting there, when you ride a fader up or down, right? It's a piece of sound design or something. every 150 milliseconds, it's going to generate a keyframe at your position. So roughly that's approximately, 9 or 10 in a second. That's way too many, right? And you just don't need that many. So by thinning, and my standard now is between 650 and 750. This is just one
we're
more
similar.
reason
We have the same
we're
kind of
cosmically
number.
connected,
Okay.
Vashi.
Yeah.
You're just going to have fewer keyframes, right? So it's kind of like some of the things we've done in Illustrator when you're when you're making curves and lines, and you can thin out the number of points along the path. You don't need 600 for a semicircle. 3 is probably all you need. Same concept here for moving faders and automation. It just makes editing the keyframes easier. And of course, you can always manually add more, on the clip in the timeline very easily. So you have full flexibility, but having the linear keyframe thinning and setting the minimum time, like I said, I like even between like 500 and 750. Kind of depends on the pacing of the material, I guess. But that's really the sweet spot, and it's not going to leave you with 300 keyframes for something that is 20 seconds long.
Right.
That's just too many.
And we'll go over it tomorrow, but again, it has to be turned on here, otherwise the functionality doesn't work. So these things go hand in hand. That's why this preference panels are so important and critical. Moving on to audio hardware, obviously you just point it wherever you want. There's not too much that I have to worry about here. Autosave 30 is out of whack. I always do 5. I'm crazy like that. And one good thing is, like, pretty much every time if I've had a crash, like 5 minutes is forever in post-production. If you think about what you could lose in 5 minutes, so, I just set it to 5, or, as smallest amount possible, as long as it doesn't keep popping up. Capture, we don't have to worry about. I don't think we're capturing off decks these days anymore, so we're not worried.
Hopefully not, but there are some that still do.
There are.
I know you've got the archives as well. I'll be the first to say, and I'm curious to see who would say in the chat. I get these urges every now and again, like maybe I should transfer those, God help us, DV tapes or DV cam, or let's not even think of the analog days, because of course I had a bunch of them.
Right.
But all these bizarre digital tape formats from the early 2000s. I mean, oh boy,
and don't forget, let's not forget the beautiful codec HDV.
Ooh, we're just gonna leave a bit of a comment for that.
HDV. Oh my God, interlink.
It was the promise of a new dawn that was
never
a lie. Yeah, it just never happened.
All right, collaboration. Here's what's critical. If you're working with even one person or 2 people, or working on a team project, collaboration is like the latest update, obviously, in Premiere Pro, that gives us access to productions and all that stuff. If you're enabled project locking, if this is not checked and you don't have your name here, then you're not part of that loop. You're not involved. You cannot collaborate with someone else to access the same information, to share projects, to share sequences. So obviously critical. You could start a new project, a new production, but if this isn't checked, then you're totally out of the loop. So that's super critical. Control surfaces, if you have a Wacom tablet, I know a lot of people are using that these days. I'm not. I can't do the pen thing, floating. It's too touchy for me. So I like a big old mouse, but that's me.
We're seeing a lot more of it, but I'm with you. I've never developed it's a skill, right? It's a skill to use a pen. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm left-handed. I always feel like it's dragging. The tracking is never quite right. And then
you know what? All of David Fincher's editors, from Kurt Baxter, Angus Wall,
I remember
they all use it. They all use it.
And it's crazy. Again, this is why there are so many of these things. Some people love the custom keyboards. Some people are using some of the loop deck devices and some of those other modular, pseudo deck-like things that with wheels and knobs and sliders, and it's fun and it works for some. I'm very classic and traditional in that way, though.
I am too.
Old.
Device control, again, decks, we don't have to worry about that. Graphics, nothing that I need to do. This, hopefully one day, I'm still trying to translate some of these colors, as you know, but you can change the names here, but I like the color spread there. Media, this is one of the most critical, especially for our project and any project. Almost every production now, you'll get camera footage that's either 4K, 6K, 8K, all these different Ks, different sizes. And when you import it, you don't want to resize every single shot and every camera when you bring it in your timeline. So this one's probably the most important for setting up a project. If you're going to have different camera sizes, different codecs, different everythings. Default media scaling, set to frame size. What this does is this ensures that you gain access to every pixel.
Right.
And when you make your timeline, let's say just it's HD, it's 1920 by 1080. If you bring in 4K, 6K, 8K, it will not sample it. It won't change the footage. It'll just censor it. And when you look at the size, the actual scale of it in your effects, you'll see that it's like 25% or 22%. So it's scaling it down, and it's scaling down every shot from every camera, no matter what the size. So it fits within the 1920 1080 timeline or 2K or whatever timeline you create, but it guarantees that you have access to it. So when you zoom into those shots, you'll actually see real pixels and not some fake stuff that, how is that
right.
How you
interpolated,
yeah.
Gross looking. Hey, by the way, Greg Bracco, I love this. It's just classic. He still has his JVC BR DV6000.
Ouch.
So, yeah, right.
Ouch, that's pain.
I mean, I remember those days, and I don't miss them, but there's every now and again, I do have a longing for like deck control. Same with, in the studio here, I have some classic DA88s, which I used to use for audio posts for video. And I don't know, there is something about that tactile feel of the remote, but then I think of all the setup and the maintenance and just the physical weight. I mean, this thing weighs like 200 pounds,
Don't date yourself, Jason.
Oh, well, too late. The silver has already done it, right?
Yeah. Just plowing through this, enable proxies. If you're going to work with proxies and you're going to import high-res footage and make proxies with Premiere, it has to be on here as well. So if this is not enabled, then you can't ingest and make actual proxies of your size, be it 720 or 1080, whatever. So it has to be checked here. This one's hilarious. Allow duplicate media during project import. That should not even be there. No duplicate media. Yeah. And so that's horrible. Never check that one. That's the most important one there in terms of, for me, on this page. Media cache. Jason, I know you'd recommend same thing. It should not be on your main boot drive. It should be on an external drive every single time. If you can get an SSD to hold your cache files, even better. Yep. Again, we're trying to get the best performance out of whatever NLE we're working with, but for Premiere Pro, it's always best to keep that separate. That's just, not common. It's not common sense, because some people will just be like, just put it on my boot drive. Who cares? Let's just start cutting. And that energy that you take to start cutting is great, and you've got to value that, but you've got to set up stuff so you can have optimized.
And that one is so critical too, because like you said, a lot of times, even if it's just, let me just quickly cut this, especially if you're dealing with 4K and above. I mean, 1080, a small little promo piece, it's not going to matter, but it is one of those, I don't always love saying best practices, but it's a practice that you should employ, which is if you're going to be cutting something that doesn't have to be long form, but that is just going to be using media, big media, lots of media, put it on an external drive.
Totally.
Put the scratches over there. Your experience will be better. And again, you'll maintain that editing energy rather than the frustration of like, trying to do asynchronous, back and forth, read and write on your C drive.
The same drive, it's going to start smoking. Your computer's just going to blow up. This is one that a lot of people sometimes don't look into, but I'm working in Premiere. I have 128 gigs of RAM on this laptop. I want to assign as much as possible to Premiere for myself, and then leave 12 gigs for, if I open Media Encoder, if I open After Effects. But if I'm just cutting, I want to assign as much RAM to it, and then make sure that my rendering is set to performance. Again, I want to try and eke out every inch of power and performance from all these components. And if you set up your computer and your workflow properly, it's incremental, but it does add up, and you get more power and more performance. If you didn't have this, if you just had it like, whatever, just split it, then you're going to, lose power, so that's important. Playback, obviously you have to have Mercury Transmit. I love cutting on like a big 65-inch screen next to my main system, and even off the laptop. I love the feeling. It's very immersive. So I always try and have one big monitor separate from my editing monitors. And if that's not on, then you can't watch on another monitor. Sync settings, I'm not going to worry about. There's a couple things here that are really important, and then we'll be just about done. When you're editing, and we're going to get to that later today, is set focus on the timeline when performing insert overwrite edits. It sounds like a mouthful, like it's like, what does that mean? This basically means if you have a sequence or you have something in the source monitor. If this is on, when you hit in, out, and hit insert, it'll know to put it in the timeline that's active. So you don't have to, if you have several timelines open, it's going to say, where do you want me to put this? So whatever the active timeline is, it guarantees that from one timeline to another, or from the source monitor to the timeline you're cutting into, this will ensure that it saves you like a keystroke every single time. You don't want to write in, out, and then use your mouse to select the timeline you want to use and drag it in. It just saves you a step, but it's super, super critical. Snap playhead, again, this is so important. Like, I love my mouse and my cursor and to be able to grab the edge of any edit or grab the edge. If it's not on here, if this is not enabled, you could still turn it on in the timeline, but it won't work. And you'll literally go crazy going, why? I have Snap enabled, but I can't use Snap. So again, it's buried in these preferences, and that's why it's so important to plow through these and look at it. And that's why I'm just trying to hit upon my favorite ones that are most important. This one's the other critical one for editing, especially when you're replacing shots or trying to use the source footage. Match frame sets in point. I'll be able to demonstrate it later, but basically, if you hit match frame, it goes to the source monitor where that clip lives, and wherever you set the in point, that's what will match when you put it back into the timeline. Yep. So if you don't have that on, it'll use the first frame of the shot, which is usually a slate or the sky.
Not what you want, right?
Or the ground. So by turning this one on, it guarantees that whatever the endpoint is in your source monitor, it's the clip and the shot that you want at the right time, and that's going in. And these are all just like, they just save time. And all these accrued on top of each other will, once you master it and play with it, you'll see like, okay, your editing becomes quicker and more efficient, and the computer just kind of like disappears, right? And you're just thinking about, all right, I want to cut, I want to drop this and that. And that's super, super important to me. And lastly, this one, trim, you do what you want. I like to have the red arrows in my timeline, not the yellow. Mm-hmm. I'd rather, if you're editing, there's ripple editing, and then there's just normal editing. If you have the red arrow at the edge of a clip, I think it's critical that I like to make a hole and see the hole. I don't like to ripple delete because everything moves and I can't see how much I've moved it, and do that times 1,000. And then I just get a little paranoid that I've made a mistake or I moved something that shouldn't be moved. I like to make holes and then close them. So
see, and actually, two things just on that, because I know we're going to move into ingest and stuff, but this was so two things. One is, we added that feature, close the gaps.
Yes.
A couple of versions ago, which, correct me if I'm wrong, you were among the top 5 people like recommending that workflow specifically for this reason. And we get asked this a lot, like, well, what's the difference between sort of magnetic style editing, which of course we have in Rush and other NLEs do this, versus the way that Premiere does it by default. And of course, we're leaving the holes by default. And for many reasons, I know you're going to discuss these, but I want to point out, and maybe we'll get a chance to show it too, that keyboard shortcut, which you can set up to close the gaps, so valuable, right? Because I'm the same way. I like to leave the gap to know, maybe I'm going to insert something here. Maybe there was a moment I want to extract, find a better take. I can just leave it out.
Or if you have music, if you have a music track underneath, that can't be moving. You set your music to hit certain points and it has to time out. So I know what you mean.
Yeah. Oh, and you just got a wonderful comment from Michelle. Oh, damn, that match frame set in point is what I was looking for a long time. I thought Premiere was designed the way I used it till now. So
it's always and what I wanted to say, I forgot to mention earlier because we just dove in so quickly. I have all these chapters that we're talking about. I have a 69-page PDF that goes in specific detail about my workflow, and it's 69 pages long that covers all of this. There's a link I'll show at the end that you can just go download it, and so it's free. You don't need anything. It's just my workflow distilled down. So I'm pulling from that in terms of like the most important points for each of these sections that, given our time constraints, we could go round and round on this.
Nice.
So I'll be able to show that at the end. So next I would want to go to ingest and syncing, right? So one thing, the biggest mistake most people make when they're starting a project in Premiere Pro is that they go here and they double click in the panel and they start browsing around and looking for files and whatnot. You can do that. If something goes south, or if you go grab a red file that has like 25 folders before you get to that and you want to import all those folders, go ahead, that's fine. It's not the best way, and neither is file import. It's there if you want it. I can't find it. There it is. So there's file import. You can do that again, but you're using basically the finder of the OS and not something within Premiere.
Right.
Every time someone reaches out to me, and I deal with a lot of helping people in terms of they have problems or questions, and I get them all day long. Anytime someone says the footage I'm importing is corrupted, or it doesn't come in properly, or there's no audio or whatever, I say, "Oh, did I do that?"
Or you just switched over from Premiere. Yeah.
Oh,
there you go.
I think I'm gonna reopen Premiere. I'm gonna reopen it just to try, every 30 minutes, just gotta bump it up again.
Right.
So let's go. Yeah, here we go.
This is live, that's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, believe me, feel you.
Yeah. So the secret to making sure that you're actually getting the right footage in, and the best way to access it and everything, is to use Media Browser. Media Browser is the finder built into Premiere Pro that gives you first look at everything. You can actually see the footage. You can interact with it. If there's merged footage that spreads out, if you're using cards or SD cards and it puts footage across two of them in your camera, if you have two cards, this will see it as one file when you ingest it. If you use the other import method of just double clicking, you'll probably get pieces and parts that don't connect, and all the metadata is not attached to it. So my biggest thing with Premiere Pro that I love is the tilde key, the top left under the escape.
Yep.
So anywhere I'm hovering, it just makes it full screen. If I want to look at the timeline in full screen, I hit the tilde key. I do this all day long. If I'm editing on a laptop, I want to zoom in like this. I can see everything. That's fine. When I bounce out with the tilde key, it goes back to that size. So wherever I'm looking, tilde key, I'm going full screen all day long, even for the export or my program monitor. I have it in there. So in Media Browser, if I want to drill down and import something, I had some raw footage here. If I'm just looking at this stuff, I can see all this. And if I hit obviously the thumbnail, then I can see all the footage, including, oh, look at that.
Oh, gosh.
So what's really cool about this is obviously I'm interacting with the footage. I can see where it is. I'm looking at my 6K footage on all these different places, and I can import it from this point. And I know that I'm going to get everything in properly, that all the components and metadata is coming in. I can grab stuff. I can hit 1, 2, 3, whatever I want, use my keys, and then import it. Here's one trick that most people don't know that I use all the time is if I'm importing something from here, if I go and touch a bin over here, so if I do Adobe Video Live Vashi, then if I go to Media Browser and I import something, it will go into that folder directly. Most people will have nothing activated, so when you import, it just floats it in your program.
End up with a huge list of raw media.
And you have like 100 files in there, and then sometimes if it's alphabetical, it gets blended in with everything else that you have in there. So always just touch the folder you want it, the bin that you want it to go to. Then when you import it on this side, then you'll be able to, just right click import. It'll go into that last folder that you had touched. So I think that's I know it's a minor thing, but it makes a huge difference when you're, trying to get your footage in. And on most productions on our film, we have 5 or 6 hours of footage that comes in, and it has to be positioned and put in the right place. So Media Browser is probably, when we're talking about optimization and getting the footage into Premiere Pro to start cutting, that's one of the most critical. Right. Once it's in, obviously we want to start making a sequence and do that stuff. I know I have the sequence here that we're working with, and I'm going to just show you what it is. And I'm going to show you one other little trick that I use all the time that solves so many problems. I was going to say, raise your hand if.
Right, yeah.
But I don't know, smile inside if you've ever had a project where you try and render it out and you get a glitch somewhere. If there's a dissolve or some kind of dip to black, there's always some kind of glitch and you can't do anything, and you turn off your GPU renderer and you have to do a software export only where it takes 3 times longer. Almost 99% of the time, it's this sucker here. By default, it's on for every sequence that's created within Premiere Pro. Composite and linear color requires GPU. if this is on, I will often get that glitch where something happens or there's some weird interactions, especially if I have effects and I'm blending stuff. Turn this off. Like, do yourself a favor. Always have it off. Don't worry about, there's no GPU acceleration that can help solve that. But that has literally solved so many people's problems. I'm like, do you have that on when you export it? Yes. Turn it off. Oh my God, it worked. Yes.
Right.
So I don't know why. Like, I don't know. Maybe you know what the mechanics behind it is, or what the difference between linear color and log color.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I'm trying to remember when we put this in, and it was something to do. I want to say at the time it was something to do with when you were moving footage, particularly like between After Effects and Premiere, right? Because there was a period where we only did linear color, or we didn't do, I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it's one of those gotchas too, where if you are experiencing strange little glitches on export with those preview files, that 9 times out of 10 will cure that issue on export.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a little thing that, you could, if you beat your head on the wall, you'll never figure it out. But if you hear it or someone says it, then you're like, oh, cool. Thanks for the tip. While we're here in the sequence setting, one more thing to be aware of is always try and set, if you're going to have video previews, set it to match your final export that you're going to create. If you're making a video for the web, like I upload 422 proxy for YouTube videos. It's 38 megabits, I believe. So it's a nice fat file. So I'll set my previews. So when if I do a really intricate edit and I export it, it's using these proxy preview files to make the final file. So I'm not rendering every single time. It's using what I've already created, and it cuts my render time down to 10 seconds for,
I mean, significantly, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If you're using the previews as you go, you could have a 30-minute piece, and if everything's using the previews, it can literally be seconds if you're export. I mean, it's maybe a minute, but it's significantly less time if you're leveraging them, for sure. And also, I would point out too, I know you've already got it set to ProRes proxy, but I think the default is still like iframe MPEG for whatever reason. So that needs to be changed to me. I mean, if you need iframe, use it, but I don't know too many people who are using that for preview files. So best to go with QuickTime. And of course, the nice thing is, as you're pointing out, being on Windows, we now support ProRes natively back in Windows. So no reason not to be leveraging ProRes proxy.
There you go. Everything should be 444XQ.
Yeah, right. Right. Maybe not, but yes, you can.
But proxy's amazing size-wise. I love it. While we're in here, if you have a sequence that you set up like that's like one of the other ones, like the red files or whatever, you have to go to custom in this editing mode to get access to this. If you're in another mode, it sometimes will not allow you to see QuickTime because it's not associated with that preset that's already been built. So whatever sequence you're in, if you don't have access, if you go down here and you don't see QuickTime as an option, then go up to the top and just change it to custom. Nothing else will change. Just the name will change to custom, and then the access to this proxy files will be available to you. So that's just a little thing.
And what are your thoughts on that? I usually recommend to people, because I think that's another one of those drop downs, because there's so many presets in there. It's really daunting. And I guess if you know exactly specifically, and I mean, again, even if you're just looking at like some of the IMX, I mean, there's 50, 60 flavors of some of those codecs in there. I usually tell people just start with custom.
Yes.
Right? It's kind of,
it gives you access to everything.
It gives you access to everything. Yeah.
And you can custom flavor to your setting, and you're fine.
Right. And you know what you shot, right? So it just makes life a lot easier.
Right. And one more thing with that, when we're talking about setting up a sequence, because there are so many settings, one trick I use all the time is, this is a red file here. If I put it up here, we can see, if I right click on the file in my program, or sorry, in my project, if I right click on it and say new sequence from clip, it will match my red footage and match everything for me automatically. So now when I go to sequence and see the settings, you'll see that it's 6K footage, this is on. I turn that off. Go away.
Right.
And then you can see here, it's already
right.
Right. So I'll change that to whatever. I'll change it to proxy for this.
Can you even do iframe MPEG in 6K? I guess.
Do you want to crash Premiere?
But let's not go there. Let's not go there. So you see, so if you right click on any clip in your stuff, change to, yes, that's fine.
So if you right click anywhere and then you new sequence from clip, you'll get a clip that matches all the settings, and you can see. And this is cool. Like, what was funny with Six Below is it's Josh Hartnett is the lead, and we had Mira Sorvino, and we had to do takes where he would go through actions that took like sometimes 10 minutes. And so we were rolling 10-minute shots. And this is all real snow, by the way. There's no fans. We actually
right.
But we're looking at 6K footage on the laptop right now. Read raw files, just watching it. And if you on an external monitor on a 65-inch, holy smokes, does that look crisp and pretty?
Yeah, I just want to point out too for everyone watching, like we're looking at native red 6K playing on a laptop at half res admittedly.
Let me try.
You're not dropping any frames. I don't know if everyone can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the Premiere panel there, the green. We're not dropping any frames.
Let's go to full res. So full res.
You're gonna brave it. All right, full res.
I just see green.
We're not dropping frames.
No.
That's freaking amazing.
So that's 6K red raw file, full resolution, not dropping, not even one frame.
Right.
So
Lucas is saying it's hard to resist the urge to drop raw footage into the new item button.
I know it is.
Right?
It is. But this is a testament. Like the desktop that we used 3 years ago, the Dell, couldn't do this.
Right.
We had to do half res to get full playback. So now I'm on a laptop that I get full res at 6K.
And it's really coming over nicely. I mean, even over the stream, we're getting like true.
It looks, so you got to walk into a close-up.
Yeah, right.
Always walk into a close-up. You know what's funny? If you look in his goggles, you can see the whole crew.
Yes. Oh, yes.
There's about 5 people in a row. And then
I just zoomed in myself right there.
Yeah.
You can see everyone off to his right. Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, on his right side, like over his right eye. Yeah, everyone's all stacked up.
Now, is that something? Did you bother to mask that out in any way in post?
Interesting that you ask. Yes, we had to create a mask for the goggles, and then match it with like shooting in the other direction. So
right.
I mean, we had to shoot a clean plate basically and map it onto his goggles for all these shots.
Oh my gosh.
And he wears them a lot. He's snowboarding, and I didn't even say what Six Below is about. It was about the character played by Josh Hartnett, who is a snowboarder. He goes out in the wilderness, gets lost during a blizzard, and is stuck out there for 7 days and does survive. But it's his journey. It's trying to piece his life together and thinking back to what he had done and what caused him to get here and his decisions over his life. So it's a very introspective and emotional film, and Josh did an amazing job, like dealing with the environment, and he was fully committed. We shot for 5 weeks up. This is just north of Sundance, up in the mountains. Like,
oh wow,
they had to take SUVs to one point. Then the entire crew had to get on snowmobiles to get to the chalet that they stayed at, and then from there they had to take snowmobiles or walk to the locations. So there's no Wi-Fi, no nothing. It's in the middle of nowhere. So that's I'm glad we got the playback. I'll just turn it to half just in case. I don't want to.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Hey, we got it at least once. That's good enough. Yeah. And it's funny. Callum Hayes is saying you should have used content-aware fill on AE. That that hadn't been invented yet for
exactly.
in 2017. So yeah, it would have saved you today. But that wasn't around at that time. You would, if anything, you could have done it as a frame sequence in Photoshop, but it was probably easier just to take the clean plate and
we just kicked it over using dynamic link, which we'll go over, tomorrow.
Really same thing. Yeah.
So
yes, we're going to cover that tomorrow too. Yeah.
And then, again, dynamic link, that's going to be exciting to talk about. But again, working with Fincher's team and watching them work, as you know, Jason, 95% of every shot in a Fincher film or project goes to After Effects through dynamic link, so they can stabilize, do split screens, do additional work, and that it's just insane to have that kind of power and access within using Premiere Pro as the hub, right? Mm-hmm. Then sending stuff to After Effects, sending stuff to Audition to do my audio tweaks that are more intricate than I can do in Premiere. It's a perfect combination, and to watch other professionals and use it and benefit from it, it's crazy. Oh, yeah. Especially when you're dealing with these huge, massive films or little ones.
Or little ones. Well, and Mallory Durick over on Adobe Live is saying she needs to watch this movie right now. So you've inspired her.
There we go.
All And we're getting a lot of comments too about just like, thank you for all these little hidden tips. It truly is these little things. And again, you're getting more questions about what kind of monster laptop. We did discuss that earlier in the stream, so you can find it at the beginning. It's a Dell, 128 gigs of RAM. Did you mention what the VRAM is on there?
It's a Dell 7750.
7750, okay.
So it's a 17-inch 4K monitor. It's I think 8 core and then 128 gigs of RAM. I maxed it out because I was like, I'm editing mobily more often now, and if I go to any production, I know that this laptop can handle 8K footage at half res for sure, and that's powerful within a laptop solution. Just to show up with a laptop and actually be able to cut and not wait for proxies or transcodes. Just start cutting. It gives me I think a benefit. It gives me an edge on other people that could show up and do the job. I'm like, I can start cutting right now. Let's go.
Totally.
So not a plug for Dell, even though I use it and love it, but it just happens to be that's what works. I want to use the gear and the hardware and software that works, that I'm comfortable with.
Right.
And it's a nice mix.
Nice. All right. So, and Reverb Mike is saying, yep, those look like the same conditions at the end of The Shining with frozen Jack Nicholson. Yeah.
There is actually a shot in here where you would swear it was based on that.
Right. Little Kubrick-esque nod somewhere in there. Oh, cool.
What I want to show you, the scene that I'll show you later. Here's the actual shot with the grade, because we shot, day for night. So this is some of the final imagery from the film when he walks up. Actually, let me back it up a little bit. To just before. And I can't wait to get to some of these examples because it's really cool. So here's the same shot, I believe, from before. And so this was shot during the daytime. If you see all those stars, this is really cool. Those stars are actual plates that we shot of real stars. And then we had the night
sky. Oh, nice.
Sky, and we matted it through. We had to roto through the trees and everything. And so here's the shot where he walked into it, and we have it framed. We cropped the top and bottom to get that 276.
Right. Oh, 276. Right.
276, same as like the Hateful Eight and the older films. But that's the shot he walked into, and they had to do a lot of work to get that. But that's just a quick peek, something. And then you have, obviously, on the other side, that's the original shot.
The actual shot. And I love this. I can't wait. I know we're not doing grading till later, but man, that's just so awesome. You're getting a lot of, whoa, that's awesomes in the chats, because that really speaks to just the power of grading and what's possible.
And the tone and sense. Yeah.
Right. Totally. Right.
So we'll
completely different tone.
Get to that. But yeah, this was insane to me because I'll find the shot, the uncolored one. It's literally daytime. The snow is blowing, but the sky is completely like white and cloudy. And the sky replacement here was just spectacular. And those are because we had to deliver a 6K version of this film for Barco, which is the 3-screen system that we had, one of our deliverables. We actually had 14 different deliverables that we had to give at the end. So that was one of them. But they needed a 6K image. There were no star plates, whatever, that were big enough to put in the sky, because if you stretch them out, it was just like a whole bunch of moons, like thousands of moons in the sky. So John Carr, the VFX editor on this, and John, he shot these plates in Colorado up in the mountains. He went up one late night.
Oh, wow.
And so those are real stars, real size with an 8K capture camera. So
wow. That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny. They're coming through so cleanly over the stream. I was gonna before you said, I was wondering like, that's got to be After Effects, right? No, those are actual. It's an actual photo.
Yeah, but we did use After Effects to mat it behind.
Right.
And then
but they weren't generated there. Right. Yeah.
No, those are real.
That's
so
amazing.
Again, it's just fun. It's fun, Jason.
Yes, Frederick would agree. Totally amazing.
All these little things. And I appreciate everyone being patient, because I know it's sometimes like, I'm not going to come here and show, look, in, out, insert. Like, that's how we make it. No, it's like, these are the important things, the takeaways that we had to learn the hard way, that we're trying to pass on, and trying to make it just an easier process for post-production, make it a more enjoyable process, Speaking of, one last thing I didn't talk about before, we had all our preferences, but there's one more section that you have to be aware of, which is project settings. It's under File, Project Settings, General. This is super critical. If this is not on, your renderer. I use NVIDIA Quadro cards. This laptop has an RTX 5000, and then So it's a big boy. And then at home on my Dell Tower, I have another RTX, but not I haven't got one of the new ones yet. I still have like an M6000 from like 3 years ago. But it's very powerful, and I'm very grateful for that. But just make sure that your Mercury playback engine is on, because without that, you'll get the red line, the timeline, meaning it has to be rendered before export, and you'll get poo-poo playback.
Right. So you're not going to get that. You're not going to see that green light trying to play back.
No, exactly.
Okay. And it's worth pointing out too, as you're dropping that down. So again, now the CUDA driver, which goes along with NVIDIA, is a separate install, though your OOS is probably installing some of that. But you also have OpenCL here, and then of course on the Mac side, you'll see Metal, yes, which is the default equivalent there. And a lot of people are always asking, CUDA, better, faster than Metal, and in some cases, yes, especially with some of the new things that they've done. But you get pretty decent performance with Metal as well. And I will say, going software only, almost never. In a pinch, if I have to because something is happening, maybe.
That's only if it glitches. If I'm getting glitches on export, and then I'm on a deadline, I'll turn it off and I'll eat it. I'll go get a sandwich and a coffee and a vodka, and then I'll come back and it'll be done. But yeah, this is where you'd access it. It's super critical. You see that NVIDIA bought ARM?
Oh yeah,
$40 billion or 41 billion.
Couple pennies there.
So sorry for the side note, but so ARM is going to make the new Apple chips. Is that correct?
Right. I think so. Yes.
I'm sure someone knows. We'll see, but that's a hefty investment. So we'll see what happens with that. One last thing on this page, here on the bottom, it's hidden, not hidden, but just like kind of off by itself. Display the project item name and label color for all instances. If this is checked, then the color of anything in your bin will match what's in your timeline. If you turn this off, Jason, correct? Then you can have separate colors in your timeline, and the same clip in your project will be a different color. So you can change stuff around and it won't ripple back and forth. So checked means it matches. Unchecked means you can have a free-for-all. None of the colors have to match.
Right. And that's just a personal preference, right? If you're kind of very into the consistency of how you're doing things and labeling things, it makes sense.
I've seen this where we turn it off because someone will want to highlight something in the timeline and change it all to blue or something to make it obvious that this needs to be worked on. But I'll show you shortly. I use markers for that, and I put them above, and then I can mark a section of the timeline. So that's it. So that's the last of just behind the under the hood kind of things you should be aware of to try and optimize and do everything inside your project. I know that we had we were talking about basic editing. I don't think it's going to help anyone if I show, if I just load something to source and whatever. But I know we have a lot of people and a lot of different stuff. Are there any questions that need answering before we move on?
No, I'm tackling them all. We're getting a lot of questions around some of these optimizations and certain things. We're answering them all, and I'm answering them back and forth. So we're good to keep on moving.
Okay, nice. One thing I also do is I like to turn off. Especially on a laptop, I'll turn off all my show transport controls. I don't use these buttons per se up here. I want to try and gain a little real estate. So, I turn those off, and I try and literally. I have different window workspaces that I've created, but I like to have the minimum amount. Adobe is amazing. Premiere Pro is amazing in terms of you can have every single one of. What was I looking for? Window. So my mouse is walking. So everything on the left here, everything on here is a panel that you can have open on the bottom here. So that's a lot of stuff to have on your thing. I try and pare it down to the bare essentials, and I try and stack everything in one spot here, markers being one of them. So I just try to have, my project, source, program, and timeline, and then meters, just so I know if I'm blowing something out audio-wise. And I don't want to see red. I want to see green's good, no red.
Right.
But actually, I'm sorry. I just want to not brag, but I just want to show here's some of we actually had a professional snowboarder, one of the most famous guys in the world, who filmed all this stuff, and it was just ridiculous, the things that they went through and the actuality and the real stuff. But that was some cool stuff. So so we're back in optimization. I think we're done with that. Last thing for optimization is always make sure that whatever panel you're on, always look for the wrench to see what your options are.
Right.
There's so many presets again that we could spend 4 hours on just presets and like what makes it good and what makes it, how to customize it. But that's not the point of this. The other thing is every panel has the little hamburger menu where, again, there's more presets, more options. And it's really important to try. If you don't know, then like poke around, try it, read about it. You only have to do it once and you'll learn a lot of stuff. Once we get into audio editing tomorrow, when I get to show audio time units, people are going to freak out. You know, it looks so nondescript here. You're like, what does that even mean? Like, it's game changer.
And I'm still one of those who's saying nomenclature wise, wording wise, I don't know how we're still doing the audio time unit thing. What it should say is samples.
Yeah,
because that's what you're actually seeing.
Yes, you should say
samples.
Yep, and then it's clear. And I've shown that. I've in ACE, I've taught about 50 other ACE American Cinema editors, other editors, like the editors of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Star Wars, all this stuff. I've worked with them to help them get comfortable with Premiere. And I think it's important to note, I'm completely NLE agnostic. Like I've cut features on Avid Media Composer. I've cut 7 on Premiere Pro, a couple on Final Cut 7 back in the day. But it's important to know as many platforms as you can. But it really impressed me that some of these older editors that are really established were coming to me and coming to Adobe saying, teach me Premiere Pro. I hear everyone's using it. I don't want to be left out of the loop. I don't want to be offered a job and not know how to use it. And that's one thing that I really appreciate, like the open-mindedness of other editors and people that want to improve themselves. I think the hallmark of not failure, but just like limiting yourself is if you have a business card or something and you say, I'm a Premiere editor or I'm an Avid editor, right? It's like you've literally just X'd yourself out of like 50% of the jobs by taking not an allegiance, but just saying, I'm being defined by my NLE.
Yeah, which
instead
is
of
not,
being, I'm a film editor, I'm a storyteller.
Yes.
You know,
I only play Yamaha pianos.
Yeah, exactly. Who would do that, right?
Right.
So again, anything you want to do, but if I'm a producer or something and I know we're cutting on Premiere and I see on your resume, I'm an Avid editor. I'm like,
right. I won't play Baldwins though, Vashi. I refuse. I don't
come
like
on.
the sound of
I heard they're
Baldwin
nice.
piano.
Baldwins
No,
are nice.
I
No
don't. Nothing against them. Steinway's okay. Bosendorfer, love, but I'm really I'm a Yamaha guy. So just a couple of quick things before we keep moving on. So, so there's a question here about what elements of automation is placed in Premiere. Is it possible to use elements of a screenwriting software to make a template for editing? So this is, while this isn't directly related to what we're doing, so the short answer is not really. So there are some third-party things, third-party plugins that you can use to kind of help automate script and tie sort of script and dialogue and things together for better editing, but not exactly in that way. Now, we used to have a software called Adobe Story, which I know, Vashi, you were intimately familiar and involved with for some time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which kind of was sort of Chilimboy kind of worked in the fashion that you're sort of describing. But I mean, we have a lot of partners where you can have different sort of automated panels that can do certain things that can control and work inside of Premiere, but natively, not really so much.
True.
All right.
Okay. Then let me get into, now that we've seen everything and like we've imported footage, there's many ways to edit. And obviously the simplest is opening a bin, turning on your thumbnails, looking through stuff, loading it into your source, choosing your in and out, and then inserting that into the timeline wherever my playhead is. I forgot I don't think I have my keyboard shortcuts. But anyways, you know what I've been using a lot is dragging this to this monitor.
That's right.
And being able to insert before the playhead, insert where it is, insert after, or replace if I'm hovering over another shot. This I've actually turned into using quite a bit because it has so many options and I can just drag and drop as needed on whatever option I want, because otherwise it's a keyboard shortcut. So I do like obviously using keyboard shortcuts to get it in, but if I have a specific task, I really do like this. And this has only been around for like a year or two, right? It's
a couple of years. This was actually just this past Friday on my Adobe Live Masterclass. This was one of the features that I showed, because it's truly a hidden gem, because you wouldn't discover it. And most people only discover it because they by accident dragged a little too far to the right before dragging down. And went, what the heck was that? There's no way to discover it otherwise. And it's so useful because, like you, If I do, you know me, I'm not a huge keyboard shortcut person, but if I move systems and I don't sync and I don't remember what they are, that's inevitably what I wind up using rather than just dragging from the source down into the timeline.
Right.
And it's so useful. And there's so many options there too, based on, again, if you're using source targeting or track targeting, you have lots of different other things you can do there, which is super cool.
Totally. So that's one way of editing where you have, and in here, if I do the tilde key, I can see I have whatever 20 separate shots in this scene that I have. So I don't like looking and hunting and going like this and seeing stuff. What I prefer to do is do a cam roll or a string out, which goes back to the old days of film where all the film that was shot on the day was put together and put on a big reel. And that would look like this. So this is a string out or a cam roll where all the footage from one day is laid out chronologically how we shot it. So we have, this is only 45 minutes of footage, this chunk, and 45 more minutes here. Yeah, so it's in its own timeline, and if I zoom in, you can see, and it has, I'll just scroll through. It has every take from that day from the different shots that we did, and it's just very straightforward. And we have wolves. I like wolves. Look how pretty. Hi, wolf.
Mm-hmm.
It was really hard to make wolves look angry because they didn't want to get angry. So we had to, it was hard. We had to find little moments when they got snippy, like those teeth. So everything's laid out in one timeline. Oh, since I'm here, here's the shot at nighttime, the original. This is what we started with.
Right.
Then you had the stars in the sky in the background, and it's dark. So that's what it looks like, the original camera footage negative, just right out of the camera. So by putting all the footage in here, what I like to do as an editor is every new shot that's a new setup, I'll drop a marker in the timeline. So I have one marker here at the first frame. Okay. And then another marker here. And then if we change to a new angle, this is a new angle, I'll just guess. Here's our footage. I'll drop a marker at every new shot. And what happens is, every new setup. So I then use a combination of keyboard shortcuts. If I use the down arrow, it goes to the next edit point. So I'm going to the next shot. If I use my next marker, I'm going to the first shot in the next setup.
Yep.
So between 4 keyboard shortcuts of one going to the next marker, forward and backward, and up and down arrows to go to the next shot, I can quickly see and navigate towards where where the shot is. Now on my markers panel, if I activate this, you'll see all the shots that I made markers at, and then obviously my assistant or someone will write, scene 1, scene 2, right. Scene 3, scene
all
4
the
in here.
Metadata, which is worth pointing out. This was also part of my little hidden gems. All of that becomes, I'm telling you, dude, cosmically connected. All of that becomes searchable from within the markers panel, from within the project panel. So if you're looking for the clips that are good, best, dolly, whatever your people put in the descriptors there, you'll be able to find those clips, which makes it super easy and efficient. So
like Jason said, if I go up here, I'm like, where's that best shot? If I type in best, it'll remove it'll just keep anything that has best in the descriptor.
Yep.
And always make sure to hit X to get back to all the shots.
That's right. So right. I did have someone actually ask me that. They're like, it's stuck. It's just searching on best or whatever. I said, oh, you have to hit the X to clear it.
Yep.
Oh, right.
And that's the same thing in the in the project panel.
In the project panel, yep.
Exactly. If you have something left over here, if you're like red, then you only have red camera shots, and you're like, where's the rest of my project, man?
Right.
And then you have to X out to see everything.
Gotta X it out, yeah. By the way, you're getting a bunch of comments here. I'll pull this one up from Jared. I'm so happy that Vashi edits like me. I always throw everything into one timeline, then use markers. And same thing from Mark. One of the best tips: all footage in one project.
Yeah, and this is a direct digital similar. I mean, it's a digital version of an analog process, right, where they would take all the film and string it together and put it on one reel so you could look at it on a Steenbeck or a Moviola. And here's a couple things of why it's so effective. If you're watching this and you're like, well, what big deal? You put some stuff in a timeline and drop some markers. Between the bouncing between the first markers so you can see a different shot, it's great. But here's the thing. This shot has 4 shots in it. If the director says, I want to see the sucks series, and I want to see the third shot in that series.
Right.
I can go right over here and then hit the down arrow, 1, 2, 3, and I'm at that shot. Right. So I know that the marker gets me to the first shot in the series, and the down arrow will get me to the number takes. And I can navigate without even thinking. And then the director's like, and I play it. Could you imagine you were trying to do that from a bin over here? If you open this, he's like, show me the third take in the fourth setup. You're like, hold on. And I've had this happen. I've done this before where you're like, no, hold on. No, hold on.
Just looking through them all. Vashi, I'm going to let you drive for one quick second. I will be right back.
Okay, of course.
So keep on rolling.
I will keep on rolling. Thank you. So that's one reason this is super important in terms of sitting here and having the markers to denote the first take of a new setup, and then the down arrow to get you to between the shots. And then obviously having the markers open so I can cross-reference that. And always have to click on the sequence to get this, because I can click somewhere else, but whatever. So this way I can see all my footage. And here's one other critical part. I think as an editor, I'm visually stimulated. And when I watch something, I remember like kind of the positioning of where it was. And in a timeline, I know this was shot during one day and it's chronological. So if I go back to the start, I know that at the start of the day, this was the first shot and the second. And when I scroll through, it kind of leaves a little imprint in me where I'm like, okay, I remember it was Josh first and then some wolf footage and then Josh again, and then the big scene, and then the wolf leaves. So I have a representation of like that day. It was Tuesday. And then when I come back to it, it leaves a little bit of an imprint. So I kind of have a basic idea of what was happening on this day, and I can quickly bounce through it. So I use the timeline, everything in the timeline, to stimulate myself, to help me remember. The memory of an editor is so critical when you're interacting with all the other teams and the directors. And directors will always say this, or producers as well. They'll say, let's say this is day 5. Day 5, there's a shot we need. It was somewhere at the end of the day. Well, I go to my timeline and I go somewhere at the end of the day. So I just scroll down here. And if they're in the room, they're like, that's the side shot of the wolf. That's what we wanted. If they said, I want something at the end of the day, and you're in a bin, you literally have no idea. You're like, it could be down there, and it could be, the clips could be alphabetical, or they could be numerated with the red numbers and they don't add up. But in a timeline like this, I have a temporal layout, meaning, start of the day, end of the day. I have my markers to denote each new setup, and I have my up and down arrows to get me to the next shot. And at a professional level, an editor should be able to find a shot very, very quickly. I supplement this with a big board on my wall where I have every scene that we shot and every day that we shot and what scenes were shot on that day. So if it's a 20-day shoot, I'll have a graph that has 20 days, and in each little box it says scene 6, 7, and 8, scene 13. So I can see which day was shot, and I can go, because each one of these string outs that I have in my timeline, I'll call this, I just said 6 will raw, but I would call this day 5.
Right.
So I know everything is day 5 on this. And on my board, it says day 5, and it says scenes 7, 12, and 19. So I can cross-reference on the chart versus a day and try and track down a shot. We only had 120 hours of footage, which is not a tremendous amount compared to Deadpool, 550 hours. But if you're asked to find one shot in 120 hours and you don't have a system to organize it and track it down, then you're screwed.
Yeah,
so
you're really screwed.
You know that, when you're dealing with bulk footage.
Oh, yeah. Hey,
ask this. Does anyone know the max length of a timeline in Premiere Pro? Right now, I'm at an hour and a half.
All right, you just heard the question, chats. What is the maximum timeline length in Premiere? And while you're chiming in, Adam just asked, and I was going to get into this because I don't use them too much these days. Every now and again, do you ever use subclips?
I have in the past, but I don't like making another iteration. Like, if I'm in here, what I like to do is, and I'm about to show my system, but I don't feel I need to make subclips because it creates another pointer, like not an asset. It's a piece of a clip that now lives somewhere else. I prefer to stay in my timeline because if I need a subclip, I can make it. But when I like to see visually where everything is, and I'll just drag stuff to another timeline, as if it's a subclip. But I don't make subclips per se that often. I know a lot of Avid editors do, and when I train them on Premiere, they're like, I want to make a subclip, and then they throw it at the end of their timeline, and they'll just have it floating there, or they'll load it in the stores. But I'm like, I don't need to. So.
I just want you to know, and I'm not saying this to be nice or kind or to butter you up, but actually, you're the one who kind of turned me on to just throwing it in the timeline, even if you're placing it 2 hours down in the timeline in lieu of subclipping.
Yep.
So
just drag
this
it down.
is something that I learned from you. I learned it by watching you.
There you go.
In combination with your fantastic pancake timeline,
which is what I'm going to if you'd like, I'd like to talk about that now, only because I've seen it presented wrong so many times, and I'd like to set the record straight with everyone, like the right way to do it. And to be honest, I gave it the name, so the pancake timeline is something I came up with 9 years ago. The actual process I had seen before. David Fincher's editors, Kirk Baxter and Angus Wall, were using this on The Social Network. They were using this. It worked in Final Cut 7 as well, and I used it there. And it works in Premiere, but it doesn't work in Avid or anything else. So it's very limited. There's only one software. I mean, I think there's another one does now, but either way, they're from our lead. So the whole point of the pancake timeline is obviously to gain access to footage and be able to interact with two timelines. What most people do is if I have the raw timeline up top, and then I'm going to be cutting into Six Below Wolf, I'll grab the name of the sequence, drag it underneath so it turns purple, and you have two stacked timelines. Now, that's great and all, and I can grab a shot and drag it down underneath. It's non-destructive in terms of it doesn't take it. If I take it from here and drop it down here, it's still in the top one. So it just makes a copy of that clip go 1-to-1. So it's here, but it's also here. Now, the problem is when I first started doing this, I'm like, well, I don't need the whole clip. I just need the in and out of this wolf, right? When I did that and you try and drag, the whole clip still goes.
Right.
So my solution was, all right, well, then I will edit, copy. I'll copy this little in and out, and then go down here and paste it. And that's like 7 clicks, right? You're like, I wish there was an easier way to do that. And there obviously is. So let me get rid of that. And let me do that. So this is great if you just have a whole bunch of footage and you want to like pull selects or something. I'll grab this and say, well, I'm going to use this shot for sure. And then you can trim them in your other sequence. But there is a finer way to do that. One other thing about this process here is if you're in your sequences and there's a shot that you love, that you want to make stand out, I've seen it grabbed and moved up one layer. So visually, you're like, that's a great shot. Let's make sure to use that. Anyone else who sits down at this station will be able to see that it's been raised one layer, and that's considered like a circle take or a select or whatever. So that's one thing I've seen in lots of edit bays that I've worked with, and I've trained hundreds and hundreds of editors. And anyone who does a string out will always, more often than not, they'll raise a clip to the next level to make it stand out. So it's an obvious choice. Now,
I love that. I love just that concept right there, because that's something I think which I even get lost myself sometimes. Again, I do pancaking because of you, but I sometimes forget to kind of do the raise thing as just an indicator of, this is the best of maybe these 3 takes or something like that, just to set it apart. It really makes a lot of sense. Right. By the way, we've got easily 100 people chiming in on the maximum timeline time. So everything from 99,999 hours, 1 day, 10 hours, 16 hours.
The answer is 24 hours.
That's right.
24 hours. I did it one day. I was cutting Mobius for back in like 2014, I think it was the premiere of the so for Vincent Laforet, I edited that short film, like the first film on the C300, which goes back, that's 6 years ago.
Isn't that hard to believe? I know, right?
Something like that. And we had a whole bunch of footage. I'm like, well, how much can I put in here? I just kept like copying media in one timeline. So I got to 24 hours. And so that's a fairly long sequence to say.
Oh, yeah. I'm amazed. By the way, of course, our very own Paco Siller on the Adobe Live team got it, but there were many other people who guessed 24. So, and a couple people made nods to Kiefer Sutherland. So,
there you go.
Nicely done. Yes. Yep. Get the reference there exactly. Little Jack Bauer reference. And that show's a long time ago already. That's going way back.
All right. So the proper pancake timeline. So I've showed you how you can make these adjustments, and you're cutting, but you're cutting from one to the other. You have to drag or copy paste, which is really not that efficient. What I want to do is go back to my project. Where's my project? And the goal is to get the sequence that has the raw footage, and let's find it in my project. I had to create this, and I'm slightly disorganized, and I feel shame. There it is. So I'm going to close the raw, and I will close full self right now. So what you want to do is, this sequence has all my raw footage. So I can either drag it to the source monitor, or I can right click and choose open in source monitor, right? So the first step is this sequence that has all my raw footage is now open in the source monitor. So that's great. And it's all playing on the left side, and I can hit in, out, and then hit insert, and it'll drop it in. But I want to see all those edits. I want to see all those cuts that live within there. So if you go to the wrench and is it wrench? Where is it? Jason. I'm losing my mind. I haven't talked for. Bear with me.
Are you looking for the gang control?
No, I'm looking for open in timeline.
Open in timeline. Oh, I mean, I think it's in the wrench, but it's also in the right click from the project panel too.
I think my eyeballs are just not working.
Yeah, I see open sequence and timeline there.
Where's
it's the second?
You mean the second option on the list? Jesus.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys. So open sequence and timeline. Now, one thing you'll notice right away, which is different, is there's a red line on this playhead, which means that I'm looking at the source monitor, and it shows it right here in the name source monitor. The great part is this entire timeline of raw footage is now playing in my source monitor, and the timeline underneath is playing in my output monitor, right? So I now have, you saw that. You're dying to see that. So I now have the left side of my screen is my raw footage that I'm going to work with, and the right side of my screen is the final image. So previously, everything was shown in the program monitor, which kind of gets confusing. Now, and I'm going to turn this on, my show transport control, so I can just use in and out. So now if I'm working and I just want to cut in, I'll zoom in, I just want to cut in just 2 seconds of Josh walking. I can do in, out, and when I hit insert, it'll put it down below into my timeline. So it's literally in, out, and one button, and I've taken a chunk of this massive footage, dropped it down here. There's another selection that we want to make. Let me turn this off. If you want to either nest it or use the full footage, delete that. We have to turn off this button here, which is insert or overwrite sequences, nest, or individual clips. If I had 3 layers of audio and I want access to all 3, I want that off. So when I do the same thing, in, out, and I hit insert, I will have all the audio goes with it. If I have this turned on, it'll just be one video and one audio file, which you can open and access the audio, but I prefer to see all the raw material and footage. So as you can see here, I just zoomed in, I just hit this little chunk and one button, threw it down into the timeline below. And I can scroll back and I can now look at another part, and I'm like, I want this as well. In, out, insert. And it just drops it in, and I don't have to do anything else. That to me is the most elegant solution for editing between 2 timelines and having access to pulling just what I want. And at any point I could zoom out and I can be like, well, oh, later in the day, there's another shot I want. And I remember where that shot was because I've been scrolling through this timeline all day. Yeah. I can't do that in a bin for me. For me, it all happens in this timeline and in the timeline I'm cutting into.
And this is, I think, the most essential thing about this, dude, and you really pointed this out so beautifully, is that So again, part of the beauty of having all of that content laid out, strung out in the source like that is you're actively working side by side with two completely independent play heads
Yes.
that really allow you to very efficiently, especially like as you've used markers, as you've raised
Yeah.
videos to different tracks, to find exactly, I mean, it's just in terms of organization and speed. Once you start doing this, I can't even tell you. Again, I think open source and timeline is probably in a pancake way. It's probably something that most people don't realize. They're used to maybe they've pancaked, but they've got two timelines that are both playing out in the program monitor. It gets really difficult to edit that way.
Sure.
It's open source and timeline. That's really the other ingredient to that.
And Jason, if you don't know, it's under the wrench and it's a second option down, just in case for you following at home, that's where it lives. Just so you know.
Right. Yes.
And just to show you, here's another expansive term. So like, as you can see, Jason made the great point. I lay out my stuff in one timeline. I add the markers. I can go anywhere. I raise the shots, and then I open source and timeline to get the red playhead, so I know it's playing on the left side. If I have, the other thing I do is I will stack different timelines here in this top. So this is my raw footage. I could have another timeline that has B-roll, or another timeline that has just audio effects. I have all my hits and risers, and I can see the waveforms. I can then start dragging and just dropping and filling it out because I see them all. I'm a visually based editor. I love looking at waveforms. I can tell you what a waveform is by the shape and the height and the power of it, right? Jason, you know that.
Oh yeah.
Ever.
Nerd alert, but yes, I know.
When I'm cutting audio, I can look at words and be like, there's an S, there's a T.
Totally. Yep.
So that's a very important skill.
And that's just, by the way, just on that, that's something which anyone can do. It just takes time. You know, edit enough audio discreetly, and you'll start to see what words look like, especially if you go into spectral, what certain consonants look like. You'll always be able to identify like hard attack transients, and it's amazing how much faster you'll start cutting audio bits together once you can really see what it is. You don't even have to listen so much as just look and identify. Yeah.
Right. And I've been doing a lot of editing lately where I'll do a radio edit first. If I get a script from the producers, and I can't talk about it yet, but I can shortly. I've done like these 4 videos that have been seen like over 25 million times, but I can't talk about it yet, but it will come out. I'll drop the news later. But I get the script. I do the voiceover for the script, and I lay it all down, and then I build pictures and sound all around it. So once I'm happy with the VO and it has the flow, the rhythm I want, I just supplement and start stacking video and images and transitions on top. And I know that the audio part's already done. If you start building like, I want to use this image, then you drop in a sentence and then another sentence later and the timing's all off. And you're like, well, that doesn't play well with the video. Do your audio first. Lay down your audio. It's radio edit, paper cut, whatever you want to call it. Do your audio first, then supplement that with everything else. Jason, how do you approach it that way too?
Same. Absolutely the same. Yep. Yeah. And in fact, someone was just asking, because I was talking recently, I was cutting together something that my youngest offspring created during quarantine. He's making little short films and things, and all stuff shot on the iPhone, and it required a lot of sound design and everything. But my first task is always just to get kind of that main dialogue track clean, or clean enough to the point where like that's all I need. I know a lot of people love cutting everything with music and all this stuff, but
cut dry. I cut dry.
I'm the same. I cut dry. And again, I think I saw there were actually quite a few comments in here. Someone was just saying like, aren't you sick of not cutting with music? It's like, I think for some things, maybe that's as required, but I'm like you. I like to cut it dry, and it gets added in later. But I want to focus on dialogue and get that story out there and just kind of string out the order of things, and I'm using the audio.
I agree completely. If your voiceover or your story or your narrative or your speech or whatever you're doing, if it's working dry without music, it's only going to be enhanced by the right music track. If you start throwing in, whatever music, something popular, like, anything that you put in, and you start laying something down and doing VO, it's going to sound pretty good. It's a professional, probably Oscar-winning, soundtrack. You could fart over that, it's going to play great. So don't worry, like, do it dry, because you don't fool yourself. The music is is a slippery seductress that can get you into in an area where you think it's better than it is.
Right.
So for me, if it's working dry, then it's only going to be benefit with the right music track.
You just kind of nailed it there. And that's the thing with some great commercial music track. Yeah, it can bring anything alive. It can make the crappiest dialogue seem awesome when it isn't. And sometimes you kind of need to be able to see that early on, like, okay, we're missing something here, or the delivery wasn't right, or it's just not going to work. Because oftentimes I've heard this from other editors too. They'll put in some amazing temp track, they'll use Queen or Beatles or whatever, it's never meant, they're not licensing that, but just to kind of get the feel. And then the task is, okay, now find something either that we can afford to license commercially or recreate that has that same spirit. And a lot of times you just can't.
You can't.
If you want We Will Rock You, I mean, it's kind of hard to find anything comparable that's like that.
And they'll jump on you if it's too close.
Right.
They will jump on you and
right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
No, that's the key point is audio. We'll do that tomorrow with some more specific examples. Again, I'm not trying to bombard everyone with too much. Like, I want to show the most important things that work for me, and I hope that we're entertaining and informative at the same time. So I appreciate everyone for spending time. I know 2 hours is a long time, and I'm enjoying this tremendously. Last thing about the pancake timeline was, like I said, just the fact that it's on the source monitor has my raw footage and the other monitor has my stuff. So I have two screens going on one screen, like two windows on one screen. It's amazing. If I go to any other timeline, everything's playing on the right side only, right? Because they're both output. So I can still cut to it, but I so prefer having, and it has to say source monitor next to your timeline. If you use that open timeline and source, or open source and timeline, I just find it amazing to hold on one image. And then I scroll through. I'm like, where am I going to drop this? Where's it going to perfectly work? And I can just scroll through until I find that point, because this is like triggering me to respond to this other visual. So that's the benefit, and that's the secret, looking to the proper way to use the pancake timeline. Now, if you use it just to drag stuff from one to the other, that's fine. This will give you the intricate chance, and this is why I don't have to do subclips, because I can literally just go, I just want that, I want the camera crew looking over here, and I want that. And then I literally just hit insert and it drops it underneath and I'm good to go. So to me, that's just spectacular access. And when you have 10 hours of footage in a timeline, as long as you have markers and you go over on the right side to your markers panel, everything is labeled, or you can visually see the first frame of a new setup. It's so easy to navigate. That's why I'm not daunted by hundreds of hours of footage, because I take the time up front to organize and create this system. And this has taken me 10 years to get to this point where it's hitting on all cylinders between the pancake timeline, the markers, the marker panel, my little raised shots. They all go hand in hand. And if one of those isn't there, then not that it falls apart, but it's not as efficient. Right. So when someone says, I got 20 hours of footage, and they're like bragging, I'm like, sweet, we'll just throw that in one timeline.
And they were looking at you like, what? Yeah. What?
As long as I have the time to organize it, then I'm never daunted by amount of footage. It's how you manage it. It's how you contain it and make it your own and just bend it to your will.
Totally. We are getting a lot of love from all of this.
Oh,
Vashi, it's coming,
that's awesome.
Coming in droves.
No, I'm glad.
Throwing them up here. This is badass.
2 hours is not easy. This is hard, but I'm really enjoying it. It's fun.
All right. So now this is something we're going to cover, I imagine, tomorrow. And just for housekeeping purposes. Yeah. So we have about 22 more minutes. But since it just got asked twice on two different chats. So just real quickly about cutting audio, and a couple of people have mentioned too, like also another really good point, really good idea to sort of cut on smaller, not crappy speakers, but like don't necessarily go for like huge, massive stereo theater style speakers when cutting. It's kind of first of all, it's just a good practice to have multiple speakers if that's possible. Yeah. But I fully agree that having something that's kind of more, we used to refer to them like the like boombox speaker, right? If you could mix something on to a boombox speaker or a mono speaker, like an old Tivoli or something, and if it sounded good there, like in the classic Yamaha NS10M days, then it would sound good everywhere. And this is no different in video too, right? I mean, you know, if you mix for the big theater, you might have diminishing returns when you listen on earbuds or, you know, on a television or whatever.
I usually I'll mix in my studio, and I have subwoofers and stuff, but I've gotten to the point where I know what'll sound good on another device. And I'm now planning my deliverables. If it's for YouTube or whatever, the web-based, I know it's going to be mostly like iTunes. Sorry, it's going to be like an iPhone or iPad or it's a laptop. And so I do mix differently in terms of my voice. If I have a voiceover or whatever, it's usually too pronounced because there's no bass in those smaller devices that bring in the bottom and flesh it out. So I'll back off on the voice a little bit and know that it'll still balance out well. It may not sound as good in my perfect studio speaker setup, but I know the end deliverable will get a really cool version of that.
And that's key. That's key too, especially for like internet, web, and mobile delivery. It's a different consideration. I mean, yes, you can have kind of it's going to sound good everywhere, but if you know that your main consumption mechanism is going to be a phone or an iPad or earbuds, I mean, it behooves you to mix differently and really to mix to those mediums. And again, like it's funny, you just made me think, it's not this Dell series you're using, but it's one of the recent ones. I remember seeing a commercial that they're touting that, you know, the speakers on the laptop now has 300% more bass, which is right. Yeah. I mean, it's just funny that, by the way, that's not slamming Dell or anybody. No. I mean, a laptop speaker, you know, laptops now are, you know, they're this thin. You just don't have enough. There's just not enough physical thing. No, well, you can't move. No, you can't push air enough. It's never gonna. So 300%. Someone said to me, "Well, do you think then that's inaccurate? That's a lie?" I said, "No. I'm sure it's 300% more from what was previously nothing." Which was nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can even. Just to nerd out, I remember I did this on with a MacBook Pros with a pair of matched pair condensers from the laptop speakers at like 50% volume, properly gained, say, just to see how much bass response was actually coming through. This is a couple of years ago. I mean, and you know, not surprisingly, there was nothing below 500 hertz. Nothing. The bass that you're feeling is when it's on the table and it's vibrating, right?
I'm still here if everyone can hear me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're there. Okay. Sorry, you cut out. Maybe it was
okay. Oh, weird. Yeah, that must be it. Yeah, no, I was saying I did this crazy test and there was nothing below 500 hertz.
Right.
And in fact, what bass response you're, you know, perceiving is when the laptop is on a table, right? And it's causing the vibration. Right. And so you're feeling this low end warmth of the vibration of the overall program material, but coming out of the little speakers.
Right. You'd have to take that table with you everywhere you go if you wanted that bass response, which could get cumbersome.
Super basic. Yeah. Yes.
While we're getting closer, I just wanted to finally, I'm teasing everyone, screw it. I shot a film with Jason a couple of years back, and you guys deserve to see this. Like, look at this beautiful man. Look at that. How could you say no to a man like that? Look at that hair flow.
This is where you convinced me. You could tell this is a while ago because my hair still had color in it. This is where you convinced me to have fans in my rider when I do any kind of shoot from now on. Have to have fans on set.
And I
don't mean fans as in like they like me. Actual physical devices that blow air to.
And look, and I'm actually a fan. So, oh yeah, taking notes. Look at him. Look at this man. What a beautiful man.
Oh my goodness.
But
one of the best experiences ever. And we did it all. I believe the take we used was take one. Was it not?
Turn up and you just kill it right out of the gate. So making just takes so many different twists and turns. I love it.
Oh, dude, that was one of the greatest experiences ever. It really was. And it's again, it's a testament to you and your style and trust. You know, this is something which we didn't really touch upon too much. Maybe we can talk more about it tomorrow, but thinking about having you in the field for Six Below and your crew kind of, again, in these, like, in a scenario where there's no connectivity, you're really a a victim to the elements around you. I mean, anything could have happened. And there has to be a certain amount of trust between like actor, director, producer, cinematographer that just makes those things flow. And I remember that session with us specifically. We had a few talks in advance. We hadn't personally met yet. We'd met over the phone and via email, but you just trusted me. And I remember I came in, I remade the soundtrack that accompanies that. And, you know, I remember sending that to you first and you're like, okay, yeah, you roll with it, you know. And that was it. And you just had this trust in me that made it so easy and effortless. And that just speaks to your, like, you know, you're just awesomeness as a human, but also as like a director. You get the people you're working with, and you instill this feeling of like, okay, we're here. It's one goal. Let's do something awesome. You know, you're listening, but your brain's working too. And that's what made that so great.
No,
I mean, that was truly one of my best life experiences shooting that with you.
That was a super blast. I hope we get to do that again. And to your point, I think this goes over, I was a professional hockey player for 10 years. My father was in the NHL. He just was voted into the Hockey Hall of Fame last year. And I think there's a direct correlation between a sports team and like a post or a filmmaking team in terms of everyone should be committed. Everyone's pulling on the same rope. You have to trust one another. You have to have each other's back. And most importantly, you have to know your role and be the best at your job. You're there for a reason. In post-production, the editor, I'm there to tell the story given all the pieces and parts. On a hockey team, the fighter is there to protect other players and let them be able to be creative and give them a sense of security. You know, the director is there to guide the team. The coach is there to get the best results. There's a lot of correlation between sports and filmmaking to be successful. Like there's a lot of really bad directors or bad editors or bad players on a team, but the successful ones, there's something clicking on all cylinders that everyone is trust. I think trust is the most important one, because you'll go through a wall for someone if you trust them. And if they work hard, it's not about talent. Talent is one of the lowest things on the list when it comes to being successful or good at a job or at film editing or film making or whatever. None of that. It's the people that grind, the people that you can count on, the people that you want to be around. That to me are the hallmarks of an amazing filmmaker. And you know how many skilled, talented people are out there that no one's ever seen their work because they can't get it in front of anyone, whatever. They don't want to go the extra step, but they're super talented. And then there's the grinders, the humpers that get stuff done and promote themselves, and it'll resonate. If you have something good things will happen.
And you said it there too. It's got to be people that you want to be around.
Totally.
You know, that affects the whole thing from input, from ingest to output. I mean,
yeah,
if you don't like being around, you know, the star of your show, that's going to make it really difficult. And I can remember when I first had my stint in LA many moons ago, and you know, after being in the music biz and having some success, having to kind of restart over. And I remember I was working for Media Ventures, Hans Zimmer's company at the time, and talking with one of the hiring managers there. And I was like, so, you know, it's pretty awesome. You know, thanks for giving me this opportunity. And they said, yeah, well, you just seemed like someone, you know, that we'd like to like hang out with. You know, hopefully you're not a jerk or you'll be out of here tomorrow.
Exactly.
By the way, they said those exact words to me. Hopefully you're not a jerk. Actually, I think it was an expletive, but hopefully you're not a jerk. Otherwise you'll be out of here tomorrow.
Right. So you got
that was it.
They gave you fair warning.
It wasn't that I had done this number of albums or this number of Billboard things or whatever. It was like, no, you have some knowledge, but you seem cool. It seems like you're going to be able to, you know, we're going to be able to work with you, and you're going to work hard, and we're going to give you a shot. And they did.
Thank you for sharing that. No, that's important. Like everyone has a story and everyone comes from somewhere, and everyone, not that they end up somewhere, but it's like a lot of it's in your control and how you interact with people. And I tell everyone when they say, how do you become an editor? And I say, be good with people. Be nice with people. Be someone that you want to be around. That'll get you so much further than I have the latest computer and I can cut super fast, awesome stuff. And I got the best set of track music and royalty free. I don't care. Are you nice? Are you pleasant? Mm-hmm. So just to try and get this wrapped up, just so we know where we're at, we covered the first 5 today, which is, hardware through advanced audio. Sorry, advanced film editing, which is Pancake Timeline. Tomorrow we'll do audio, color correction, VFX, deliverables. So we'll have plenty of time to fill in the blanks. If anyone wants to tell Jason some other stuff, like what they want to hear, but there'll be more than enough stuff to go over tomorrow. One thing we're talking about, since we're just finishing up on editing, I made this because when you're dealing with a lot of footage and how do you approach an edit for either a scene or a film or whatever, it's nice to break down, what the actual components are. And for me, it's like, a shot is just one thing. A moment is a couple shots that mean something. A scene is several moments that equate to a bigger thing. A sequence is a bunch of scenes that are trying to drive towards a point. A reel is roughly 20 to 22 minutes of a film, because that's what film used to be delivered on to the theaters.
Right.
So the reel is, again, analog to digital. There's the convergence. So reel is about 22 minutes, and film is, the blood, sweat, and tears of the entire team, crew, everyone. And so sometimes it's nice to look at it in components as opposed to film is so daunting that it's just so many things. Well, there's how it breaks down.
I love that. And this is something which, if everyone's not already screenshotted, and of course you have this on your site too.
I have it on my site, and I'm gonna
and you can I've been posting it in the chats, by the way. We'll pull it up at the end again as well, but
okay.
I've been posting your link multiple times here. But I love this because for one thing, it's not all terminology is important, right? I mean, we can't neglect the legacy of filmmaking. Yes, it's not what it was even 10 years ago, let alone 50 years ago, or anywhere in between, 100 years ago. But these terms, they still apply. Like someone was asking me something on a recent stream about, we were talking about expressions, actually, how I don't like to use colloquialisms and things in my speech, especially because we have such international audiences.
Right.
But I said something about in film and in acting, taking a beat. And someone asked me about that and was asking like, oh, do you mean like, like give me a beat? And I was like, no, not that. And we kind of went into the origins of this a little bit. And it's just one of those things that you're going to hear this a lot. So whether you really use reel or not per se, like you were saying before, it's something in your toolbox, If you're nice, it doesn't really matter if you know what reel is or was or meant, but it behooves you to have those little gems of knowledge, because it just kind of up levels your craft, and it shows that you're really dedicated and interested in the process. I give way too many anecdotal, bizarre, old school stories on here during our live streams all the time, which are fortunately well received. But I think it's because we start to lose a little bit of that because of how quickly things get kind of thrown out and put together now. But all of this still matters, right? Especially if you're cutting something longer form. You're going to encounter these terms, and it helps to really know what they are and the origin, and it's just going to make you a better editor, right? Totally. In the end.
One other thing I made a shareable about it is that people always ask me, like, when you start editing a film, how do you start? Like, you start the beginning. My advice is always to, if you have all the footage and you're in that lucky position and you've already read the script, approach a scene that you feel really a connection to. It could be the first scene, it could be in the middle of the film, it could be the climax. But I always find if I gravitate towards a scene that I really understand and I've seen the footage, and I'm like, oh my God, I know how to cut this. I know it. That's what I'll cut first. No one says you have to start cutting at the beginning of the film.
Nope.
Latch on to something that you gravitate to and that you have an emotional connection to, because it's going to be cut better. Then when you show that to the director or the producers, you'll gain their trust, because they're like, oh, he gets it, or she gets it. Like, we're on the same page. And it's not showing off. It's just saying that I get it. I know what we're going for. I understand the tone. I've already had those conversations. Here's my take on this moment. And that gets you a lot of, not leeway, but it gets you a lot of trust. You're gaining trust by saying, look, I know what you guys want. I know what this thing needs. Here it is. Yep. So that's why I like to say, like, pick that scene. Don't always start at the beginning.
Nice. Hey, by the way, so we've got a question pulled up from TV Design. Can one have several pancake sources that are switching when you switch the timelines?
Yeah, you can add another source in here, and this will be a source, and then this will be a source, and you can do like 3 or 4 up here, and then have.
Right. I think I've seen you do even 3 or 4, but that's the key, is they're all being fed. So it's one program monitor timeline, but multiple sources.
Multiple sources, correct. Yeah. You can do that. So that's why I said I'll have like raw footage, and then I'll have B-roll on this one, or sound effects or visual effects. And then again, it's all just laid out there, and I can just do in, out, and drop it down wherever my playhead is. So that's definitely for sure. I mean, I've screwed around where I've done like Where is this? It's not letting me drag this, is it? Where you can do 3 timelines. I've had like 5 timelines just to see what I could do. But but with the tabs, I don't need to do it vertically. I can do it horizontally and maintain just the 1 and 2. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I just do 2, and I have my tabs. How about one last thing before we have, if there's
we've got about
questions.
6 more minutes, and I'm just taking questions. By the way, I just see right here, someone is familiar, Amy and Carl McKay, Big Ned.
There he is. Oh, I love them so much. They're so beautiful. And I owe them a call. I'm saying this publicly, Carl. I owe you such a call. I have been buried. Don't be mad at me. I love you both. Be nice to me. Oh, that's terrible. I feel bad. No, they're sweet. He's an amazing editor himself, and he inspired me. We used to go to these hockey tournaments, and he was tasked with taking hundreds of hours of footage from like 4-day weekend and cutting it down into basically a show reel for all the guys. Mm-hmm. And Carl is a hockey player as well, and he had to shoot everything and party and play hockey. That's very difficult to do all those things.
That's not easy.
And get the angle, right? With the time we have left, I just wanted to share this. This is, again, take a screenshot or whatever. This is from like 20 years of dealing with stuff. I'm not going to walk through. If someone has a question about one specifically, I can answer it.
But make this full screen, yeah.
Yeah, but I just think it's important. There's a lot of things to learn. I just try to break it down into, again, digestible chunks for everyone. And I think one of the most important things in our industry and every industry is like pride in your work, and like obviously giving your 100% all the time, but sometimes it's 150% that you have to give. Like I was on a deadline last night. I was up to like 4:30 to hit it, and then wake up to prep for this. And it's not easy sometimes, but it is so rewarding later when you get the feedback that you want, especially when the work you've created and collaborated with has an effect, makes a difference. It resonates with people. That's the ultimate thing that I enjoy. I'm not in it for fame, money, yes. But I want to leave a mark. I want to leave a message. I want to create something that has a chance to grow and will hit other people emotionally the same way. Like that's what makes me feel good,
So, and this is actually really a kind of a great place to kind of end today. And I'm as I'm reading through these, I like that so much of this is actually about it's people. The lessons are actually very specific to like behavior, right?
Yeah.
It's human behavior. There's very little in here. There's nothing in here that's like know your S.
There's no technical.
Right.
Technical is
technical
so
here at all.
on the list of editorial or post-production. Technical is a good thing to know, like the basics, but it's not going to get you,
it's not going to get you the work. It's just not. And maybe you could elaborate a little on this. I'd love your take on this, because this is something which, fortunately, we've discussed this. I was really fortunate to have a lot of mentors when I was starting out in the music biz in particular. And this concept of knowing your role, but embracing and owning your role. And maybe you could talk a little bit of that, because I think this is something which I think people, especially now, it's hard to. I think there's like a fear of owning it, and there's also this question of like, do I need to do a little bit of your job and a little bit of your job, and because it's going to make me look better, which kind of goes against that.
It goes against the team philosophy. Like, you're talking, you're nailing it exactly. Know your role, own your role. Like, be the best at your job. No one's going to take that from you. If you have extra left over, that doesn't mean you go somewhere else and be like, hey, I finished my stuff. Let me take a look at yours. I'll give you some feedback. No one wants your feedback at that point. All right. So like, know your role, be the best at your role, and own your role. You will get more respect when you over deliver something in your spectrum of what you're doing and what you're hired on that job for than anything else. So slay it, do that. And you know what? As soon as you're done with that task, don't wait for someone to say, all right, you want to move on to the next day's footage, whatever. Just do it. Start doing it. When someone comes in, they see you cutting like tomorrow's footage. You're like, what are you doing? Oh, I already finished that. I'm just moving forward, just trying to get ahead of it, try and stay ahead of it. So like, know your role, but own your role. Be the best X or whatever it is that you are, and just own it and have pride in that you didn't cut any corners, that you triple checked your work, That you don't deliver something and be like, oh, hold on, don't look at that version. I got another version. I caught something. I screwed up.
Right. Oh, I didn't watch the export that I just
I didn't
spent.
watch the export. Oh my God. Just handle your business, like be the best, where if you have the trust of the director, the producers, the other teammates, that's the best feeling in the world. Yeah. To have their trust that you don't drop the ball, that you just deliver. You're the mailman, like that's the best feeling.
I love that. And I really, again, just that concept of like it, and it doesn't matter what the role is either, right? I mean, I'm the person, right?
Supervisor, boom operator, whatever. Just be the best. Like just own it.
Be awesome. Be grateful, right? That stuff goes a real long way. And Paco is saying, slay it. Yes, I mean, that's it. Again, one of these mentors used to tell me, don't go to a shoot or a session and have anyone in that room be able to say, he just like didn't do his job, or he was lazy, or he was just like, was this dude even here? Like, what was he here for? You want them to be saying, hey, maybe, do you want to hear this? Do you want to take a look at this cut? Hey, Vashi, maybe you're the boom operator in those days. You want to see the cut that we just did? Like, you want those invitations, and those are only going to come by being a decent human, right?
Totally. We want to share. Yeah, we want to share. I put up on my screen, that's the link. The bit.ly link is to the 69-page PDF that breaks down everything. So some people can even get a jump on tomorrow's stuff if they want to peek at that. But that's a really good reference. And again, that's the culmination of like 20 years of making mistakes and then dialing it down into a coherent system of approaching post-production, and that's some of my social media if you want to reach out to me, if that helps.
Yes, indeed. All right, friends. Well, with that, we are just about out of time. So thank you so much for joining. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channels, 12 Pacific here on Adobe Live Behance. So be sure to stick around for what's coming next. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Vashi, stay on because I'll be joining you in a second. Okay. But until then, everyone, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Bye-bye.